What's up, Punx? We are back with another session from Parx Casino, another 2-5 session. This is going to be the 7th session that we could be up, but you'll have to wait till the end to find out if we are. Anyway, another note, we got our first batch of merch. I really made these hoodies just for me, but you have to have a minimum order, so I ordered a bunch. If anybody's interested in getting one, it's got our dagger logo on the front, our skull logo on the back. I'll have a picture of it right here for you. If you want one, hit me up at pokerpunx@gmail.com and I'll send you the details on getting them. Also, I ordered card protectors. Again, something I wanted for myself, but if anybody out there is interested in them, they're really cool metal card protectors. They have the dagger logo on one side, the skull logo on the other. Plus, if you're in a tight spot, it has a call and a fold on either side. You can just flip the coin and make sure you know what to do. Anyway, let's get to some hands.
We open this session in the big blind and we look down at King 3 of Hearts. Folds to the cutoff, who raises to $35. The button folds, the small blind folds, but we decide to look him up. With 72 in the pot, we see a flop of deuce 7-3 with the deuce and the 7 of hearts. It's a great flop for us with a pair and a flush draw, but seeing as though we called the pre-flop raise, we check for deception, but unfortunately the cutoff checks back here. The turn peels off the jack of spades. Since the cutoff checked and we didn't improve, we decided to take the lead here and bet out $45. I'm thinking he's probably going to call, but we have enough equity and enough of a draw that we might better get a little bit more out of him if he does call. But to my surprise, the cutoff quickly folds and we scoop a nice little pot to start off the night. The next hand we play, we upgrade to a premium when we look down at pocket queens on the button. A guy named Vince, who we played this session with, is under the gun and makes it $20 to go, but $20 is not going to be enough for us, so we 3-bet to $90. Vince calls with 187 in the pot. We go to a flop of 9-8-6 with the 9-8 of hearts. When Vince checks, we check back thinking we might better get him to call a larger turn size bet if he thinks that we're only on an ace-x hand. This plan semi-backfires when the 5 of spades hits a turn, putting a 4-liner to a 7 on the board. Vince then bets $200. He really shouldn't have many 7x hands here, but he could have anything from pocket jacks down through pocket 8s here. I think folding is a bit too nitty here, and I'm trying not to play a bloated pot here with only one pair, so raising is out of the question. That really leaves only one option for us, and that is to call. Now with 587 in the pot, we're off to a river of the 2 of spades. Vince checks again, and I take the passive route here and I check back. I show the queens and Vince folds. I may have been able to get some thin value out of him here, but I got scared of the board, and that's something I really need to work on. I've heard it from a few comments. I've heard it from a few friends that I really need to be able to go for the value there on the river and just fold if I get raised. So Vince got off light this time, but I got to work on that for myself. The very next hand, we find ourselves in the cutoff with King 9 of clubs. We raise to $20. Small blind calls, and then the big blind raises to $75. Both the small blind and I call, and we're off to a flop 3 ways with $225 in the pot. That flop is rather favorable for us as it comes off Queen Deuce 7 with the Queen Deuce of clubs. We have the second nut flush draw and a backdoor straight draw here. Small blind checks, and then the big blind bets $125. This is an easy call for us as we have a lot of equity here, and then the small blind raises to $325. The big blind instantly folds, so we tank for a bit and we start to think what he would do this with. Small blind has us covered and we're about 950 effective. We figure that if we turn the flush, he may have a hand strong enough that he won't be able to fold, then we may be able to get max value. With that in mind, we make the call. Now with $1,000 in the pot, we see the ace of diamonds on the turn. Small blind instantly goes all in, and we Hollywood for a bit even though we know this is an easy fold. After we fold, the villain shows pocket deuces for bottom set. Would have been interesting to see if that club did hit the turn, if he would have made the same move, but we'll never know, and we're off to the next hand. couple hands later, we are in the cutoff and we look down at ace 10 offsuit. Under the gun opens for 25. We call. We go to a flop heads up with 57 in the pot and see 8-6-3 with the 8-6 of diamonds. Not too much going on here for us aside from a backdoor flush draw. The villain bets $40 and we decide to float here with our 2 overs and our backdoor draw. With 137 in the pot, we see a turn of the queen of spades. This is no help to us, so when the villain fires for $85 here, we have to give him credit for something better than ace high with no kicker. So we fold, and so far this session, we don't have very much going for us. For our next playable hand, we are in the big blind with queen jack offsuit. Under the gun and under the gun +1 limp, and then middle position player makes it $20. The button, small blind, under the gun +1, and I all call. With 120 in the pot, we're off to a flop of 8-6-3 with the 8-6 of spades. When the small blind checks, I check and flow with nothing more than 2 overs, and to my surprise, it checks through. Off to a turn, we see the ace of diamonds. Since everyone checked the flop, I take a stab here and lead out for $55. The under the gun player calls and everyone else folds. Almost got it through there. With $230 in the pot, we head to a river of the queen of spades. We do hit a pair here, and since now we have some showdown value, we check in hopes of getting to a free showdown. However, the villain has other plans and bets out $400. This is such a polarized bet, and it really doesn't make any sense the way the hand played out. However, I only have second pair, and I'm not really in the mood to hero call yet, so I let my hand go. The villain then shows ace king of spades. I was surprised to see that hand since he didn't raise, didn't 3-bet the flop, didn't try to build a pot at all. All things considered, I think I pretty much lost the minimum here, and we can chalk it up to a little bit of information about this player, but all things considered, it is another loss, and we need to start turning things around. For our next big blind, we are dealt queen jack of clubs. Under the gun limps, then the low jack makes it 25 to go. Hijack, under the gun, and I all call. With 102 in the pot, we're off to a flop of 4-3-4. We check first to act, and are a bit surprised when the flop checks through. We see the ace of clubs on the turn. This is a significant improvement to our hand, so we take the lead and we bet out for $50. When the hijack calls, we feel we may need a little help on the river, especially since we don't even have a pair yet. That river comes off the 3 of spades. Since our draw bricks out, we wave the white flag and check, and the villain checks back only to show ace queen offsuit. I can't believe he didn't bet this, although it really wouldn't have mattered since I wasn't calling anything, but it's a huge surprise and lets me know this player is ultra passive. But yet again, another loss, and we are headed in the wrong direction this session so far. A short time later, we are in the small blind with deuce 3 offsuit. The button limps, we call, and the big blind checks his option. So with $15 in the pot, we see a flop of jack 3 deuce with the jack 3 of hearts.
Attribute.
We absolutely smashed this flop, and now the only problem is getting money in the pot since there was no pre-flop action. We check to conceal the strength of our hand. The big blind also checks, but the button doesn't disappoint and bets out $15. We call, trying to get the big blind to come along, but he ends up folding. With 45 in the pot, we see a turn of the 4 of clubs. While this does put a couple straight possibilities out there, we can't be afraid of those. We check again to set the trap, and the button falls right for it and bets $55. We spring the trap by overbet shoving. The villain has about 365 effective here and immediately makes the call. With 775 in the pot, the river peels off the 5 of diamonds. No! Oh man. We figure we'll beat here until the villain turns over pocket kings. Another ultra passive pre-flop play, and this time it costs this guy his entire stack. Finally, we're on our way back up. A few orbits later, we are under the gun and we wake up with 2 red kings. We make it 25 to go and get calls from under the gun +1 and the big blind. Off to a flop with 77 in the pot, we see 985 rainbow. It's a little coordinated, but when the big blind checks to us, we are not slowing down here. So we lead out for $50. The under the gun +1 folds, but the big blind ends up making the call. With 177 in the pot, we see the jack of clubs hit the turn. Big blind checks again, so we continue and bet out for $85 this time. The big blind looks like she's contemplating a raise. I'm not sure if this is an act to get a reaction from me, or if she's just doing this unconsciously. I try not to give up anything. Eventually, she settles on a fold. So either she was just posturing, trying to get a read from me to see if she could get me off the hand, or I could have completely misinterpreted her actions. She could have been thinking about whether or not to call and decided not to. 2 or 3 orbits later, we are under the gun again, and we raise to $20 with ace-5 of spades. Vince from the earlier pocket queen's hand calls from the low jack, and the hijack and big blind come along as well. The pot has $82 in it, and we see a flop of queen 7-4 with the queen 7 of spades. We have the nut flush draw and a backdoor straight draw, but since we're out of position, I decide to check here when the big blind checks to me and see what develops. Vince in the low jack takes the lead and bets $65 here. The hijack and the big blind both fold, but we make the call. 212 in the pot, and we see the glorious 6 of spades on the turn. We check again to see if we can get Vince to bet again, and he obliges and bets $100. Since he has shown aggression on 2 streets, we decide to make our move here, and we raise to $325. Vince goes into the tank for a good long time. The longer he thinks, the more we think he's going to call. Unfortunately, he decides on a fold. Not only does he fold, but he shows Jack 8 of spades.
What you talking about, Willis?
Can't believe he was able to get away from this one and lose the bare minimum. Kudos to Vince for being able to fold here and having such a strong hand and getting away from it relatively cheaply. At this point in the session, most of the table are straddling under the gun, as Parx only allows an under the gun straddle. Our next under the gun, we straddle and look down at 2 red kings. Under the gun +1 limps, and low jack raises to $35. When it gets back to me, I raise to $165 since I'm out of position and only the low jack calls. With $347 in the pot, we see a flop of 9-7-3 rainbow. I assume that the low jack has to have a decent hand, most likely an overpair to this board, so I size up to $225. Unfortunately, the villain folds. He must have had a hand like ace-king, ace-queen suited maybe, and it's a shame that we weren't able to get a little more value from him, but it's always nice to chip up without a fight. A few hands later, we are on the button and look down at king 3 of spades. Hijack opens for $20, and the only callers are me and the small blind. With 65 in the pot, we go to a flop 3 ways of king 8 deuce with the 8 deuce of spades. Woohoo! We flop top pair, second nut flush draw, pretty good. Small blind checks, and then to my surprise, the pre-flop aggressor also checks. But we're not going to let it check through, so we bet $55, trying to make it look like we maybe have a middle pair and don't really want to call. The small blind looks us up, and the hijack folds. So with 175 in the pot, we get the jack of spades to complete our flush on the turn.
All right.
Then we get the good news when the small blind shoves for $385. We obviously call here. The river is the 10 of hearts. We show our flush, and the villain folds, and we scoop another good pot here. A short time later, we are in the small blind, and we look down at pocket threes. Under the gun limps, and then the cutoff makes it $20 to go. The big blind, under the gun, and I all call. With $80 in the pot, we see a flop of 4-4-10. Small blind, myself, and the under the gun player all check. The cutoff takes a lead and tosses in $40. We call along with the big blind, and the under the gun player folds. With 200 in the pot, we see the best turn possible, the 3 of clubs. We now have pretty much the effect of nuts and check to let the cutoff bet out again. But to my surprise, the big blind now leads out for $150. The cutoff then calls. I figure I might be able to get stacks in by the river if I raise here. So I think about what kind of sizing I want, and I settle on a very polar sizing of $500, which is roughly the stack of the big blind. Unfortunately, the big blind and cutoff both fold here. Not to be able to extract any extra value. I'm a little disappointed. I really don't know what the big blind could have bet that much with and not called off. Maybe a flush draw, maybe like a combo straight and flush draw. We won't know, but it's always nice to pick up a good pot. The last hand we decide to play this session, we look down in the big blind at 6-4 of diamonds. The straddle is on, so when it folds to me, I complete for the $10, only to have the straddler raise it to $40. While this would normally be a fold, for some reason I have a weak spot for 6-4, and we end up calling. With 82 in the pot, we see a flop of 6-6 ace. Okay, so we flopped the world here, and I'm hoping the villain has some sort of ace-x hand here and will continue, so I check. But unfortunately, the villain checks back. The turn actually improves us when the 4 of hearts hits a turn. We check again, as this card should really have no effect, but unfortunately, for a second time, it checks through. I was really hoping that this would give some sort of draw to the villain, but apparently not. On the river, we see the 5 of hearts, which brings the backdoor flush draw. We beat that, assuming that our opponent doesn't have exactly 2-3 of hearts. With that in mind, I bet out $100, and unfortunately, the villain folds. He must have been just trying to steal with that pre-flop raise, but we get a little bit more money out of him when he was being aggressive and we flopped the world. It's a shame we couldn't get any more value here on the river, but with the way the session started off and the way it ended, we're perfectly happy with the way it went.
All right, Punx, we were into this session for $1,000 to start. We added on 500 midway through when we were not running well, so we were in for a total of 1,500. But we were out for 26.36, so we were 11.36 to the good side. That's the way we like it here. We like to keep that run good going. This makes, I think, 7 sessions in a row now, so that's an all-time personal record. We're going to see if we can keep it going. And remember, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's really helping out the channel a lot. And don't forget, like I mentioned in the intro, we have our first batch of merch. I made them really for myself, but you have to have a minimum order, so I ordered a bunch. If anybody's interested in them, hit me up at pokerpunx@gmail.com, and I'll let you know the details for getting something. I'm gonna have card protectors soon too, and I'm getting some stickers made that I'm gonna throw in with anybody that orders anything, so keep your eye out for that. Anyway, next up for the vlog, we had a little road trip down to Tampa. We played at the Hard Rock in Tampa, and we played at One Eye Jack's down in Sarasota. So look for those episodes coming up soon. And as always, remember, run it up the Punx.